All right, we're going to get started, okay?
Okay.
So welcome everybody. Welcome to Studio in Caminati and welcome to the Bennett-Schmidt Higher Aim of Art lecture, which is really a panel discussion this evening. I'm James Savoy, I'm president of Studio in Caminati, and I'm joined by three esteemed colleagues, Bo Bartlett, Leona Shanks, and Dan Thompson. I'll introduce them more formally in a minute. I want to thank you all for coming, and I want to thank the faculty who are here. I see a couple of board members are here, which is great. Students, faculty, and people from outside, welcome. So this discussion is called The Art of the Demo, Entertainment, Education, and Spectacle. And this comes out of a show we have up in our gallery space at Studio in Caminati. For those of you who have not been at our space, our gallery is 220 feet long, 14 feet wide, 14 feet high. We have the exhibition we have up is part of our Bacchanalia or our gala. It's called Exhibition Docere, which is the Latin for to teach or instruct or show. Actually, I think my Latin scholar daughter says it should be docere, unless it's church Latin. So I'll go with the church Latin, docere. This came about because when I was looking at doing an exhibition for the gala, I called Bo and Leona and asked for work from Nelson and Bo. And Bo said, can I? And my background is in performing arts, so I said, sure. And then I went to Dan Thompson and asked, what's a demo? And so Dan schooled me in what a demo was. So I reached out to Leona and asked about demos from Nelson and herself and Dan to give demos. And so we have, I think, 43 pieces that are demos. And we'll get to demos in a second. And we have, what's interesting to me is we also had a faculty show up at the same time. And so we just added to that. So the demo work really is in conversation with finished work by faculty, which is really interesting to me. And I think to our students and our faculty, what's been great, the show went up the end of September. And what's been fascinating to me is watching students and faculty congregate in the corridor, which is our gallery, and talk about the work that's on the walls. And they've been moving up and down the entire corridor. There are 85 pieces now. And that show is up until November 19th. So if you are in Philadelphia or near Philadelphia and want to see it, you should stop by and see it. It's really quite an exhibition. I want to thank, by the way, Stephen Bennett and Dr. Elaine Malloy-Schmidt, who fund the Bennett-Schmidt lectures and are on our board. I guess I'll start. So demos, as Dan tells me, are for teaching, right? So the work that's up by Nelson, Leona, Bo, and Dan are artifacts, right? They're artifacts of a pedagogy. And so we have this sort of end product, right? What we're missing is that performance. And that's why it's really valuable to have 3 of the 4 artists here so they can talk about some of what went on while those pieces were created. My background is in performance. I have an education in performance studies from NYU. These kinds of things fascinate me. And there's that sort of ephemeral quality of that performance, but that performance is about teaching. So I think you might call demonstrations a signature pedagogy, something that happens particular to art schools, but not even all art schools, right, Dan?
That's right, yes.
So it's something that's been ingrained in the curriculum at Studio in Caminati. And that's, comes from Nelson Shanks and Leona, our founders. So I'm gonna, what I wanna do is scroll through a PowerPoint I have of all of the images of the demos in our gallery. I do want to start by introducing our panelists. I know that the three of them really need no introduction, but I think it's appropriate. We pay due honor to these distinguished guests. So Bo is an American realist with a modernist vision, educated at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. His paintings describe the beauty he finds in everyday life and celebrate the underlying epic nature of the commonplace and the personal significance of the extraordinary. Although the scenes are set around his childhood home in Georgia or his island summer home in Maine, they represent a deeper mythical concept of the archetypal universal home. Dan Thompson, who's our Dean of Fine Arts at Studio in Caminati, is a native Virginian, graduated from the Corcoran School of Art in Washington, D.C. He earned an MFA from the Graduate School of Figurative Art of the New York Academy of Art, and supplemented his training with several additional years of private study and apprenticeship along the East Coast of the United States, including some with Nelson Shanks. He's been awarded 2 grants from the Elizabeth Greenshields Foundation, has twice received the Ethel Lorraine Bernstein Memorial Award for Excellence in Painting from the Corcoran College of Art Design. In 2001, he won the Best of Show in the American Society of Portrait Artists International Portrait Competition at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. His work can be found in public and private collections throughout the United States and in Canada, Europe, and the Middle East. Leona Shanks, who co-founded Studio in Caminati, studied at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Art and was a finalist in the Still Life category Renewal Center 2011-2012 National Salon Competition. Her solo exhibition, Searching the Soul, was featured at the Daisha Gallery in New York, and her work was included in the World of Art Showcase in Las Vegas, a collection of 70 artists and 2,000 pieces of art. She was juried into the 2011 Laumeister Fine Art Competition at the Bennington Center for the Arts. She placed first in a juried competition of the Inspiring Figures, American Women and Figurative Art at the Butler Institute of Contemporary Art in 2010. She was selected one of the top 100 finalists in the 2009 Art Renewal Center's International Arc Salon in the Still Life category. She's also known as she is also a finalist in the 2007 competition. An accomplished sculptor, Leona won the Edmund Stewardson Award for Sculpture. Her paintings have been included in numerous exhibitions, and her work is included in many private collections. Leona says, as a painter, I want to be fearless. My work is a personal search to understand the world in which we live and to create paintings of relevance to our existence. A great quote. So these are our illustrious panelists.
Actually, James, I need to make one correction. I did go to the Pennsylvania Academy for 1 year, but you eliminated that I apprenticed with Nelson Shanks for 4 years.
Thank you for the correction. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up, I'm going to share my screen and pull up a PowerPoint presentation. So can you all see that?
Yes, we can. And in addition to also voicing my sincere appreciation for Stephen, Alan Bennett, and Elaine Melody-Schmidt, I want to thank you, Jim, for being our esteemed moderator tonight and for all the preparation that you put into this.
You probably should wait till we're finished to see if you still like it.
I'll thank you again then.
All right. So this is the exhibition Docere. You see a couple of works by our faculty on here, and a piece by Dan you'll see in a minute. Wait a second. I need the right keyboard. Sorry, I've got 2 computers in front of me. I'm using the wrong keyboard. Here we are again. So if you haven't seen our gallery, this is where the show is, and this is what it looks like filled with people. So there are 85 pieces in this hallway and in an adjoining hallway. You see that all of the paintings are hung from the picture rail here. The picture rail was installed in 1938, so I love that we hang art from it. This used to be the horticultural department at the Bach, in the Bach building. So I'm going to start with these works, by the way, are shuffled. So I haven't done them all by artist. So this first one by Dan, the red chalk demonstration. To me, this is really interesting. It really shows great texture, but I feel such emotion coming from this. Dan, you want to say a little bit what you're doing with this piece?
So this, you could say demonstration. You might also want to say conversation. I noticed you used that word about the juxtaposition of the demos and the faculty finished work. And I would say a demo is, in some respect, a kind of silent visual conversation with your audience. And that makes it special. In the grand scheme of things, so you mentioned my own training. I went to a 4-year art school, and I do not remember ever seeing a demonstration in the 4-year art school that I attended. It wasn't until I got into the atelier system that I was immediately met with many demonstrations. And I have to say that a kind of person that would see a demo or maybe even contemplate a demo watching this panel discussion just needs to keep in mind that, these are works created in a communal setting, in a group setting. They're started and they're finished in that setting. And I always kind of found that magical, and I always wanted to emulate that. So this drawing in particular is a drawing it was about red chalk, a conversation about the technique of red chalk and about putting so many kind of concepts regarding the materiality of it, as well as drawing from life together and making a drawing in front of a group of people. Was Justin. I remember he is a writer or was a poet, and I really was interested in his kind of inward gaze. As soon as he looked down a little bit to show that subtle kind of covering of his eyelids, I knew I had the right kind of pose. Spoke to me. So thank you for being fascinated by it.
So the reason I shuffled the slide deck was because I think it's really interesting to see how these pieces speak to each other. Because they're all very different. So with that, I'll go to the next one. Oh, there we go. So this one's by Nelson. And to me, this is really interesting because again, I'm not a painter, so I sort of have to guess at what the lesson might be here. But to me, it's about, there seemed to be maybe about mass and volume. And I'm sort of guessing at that. I don't know. I think what I like about it is it sort of hints at the volume of her body as she lays there. This is really interesting to me here. This sort of purple dark color here, and then these strokes right through here. I don't know. I get to ask the naive questions, but when it comes to talking about the technique, I'm going to fumble. I apologize for that. And go on to the next one, which is those. And what I really like about this, the head is looks so finished, and there's such depth in that. And you move out to, I'm pointing so you're in my house, to this area, which is less finished and becomes flatter. Bo, what do you remember when you did this demo?
It says there 2018. I don't know if that's right or not. But
I meant, did you remember do you recall doing the demo?
I studied with Nelson for about 2 years in 1977 through 79, I think. And when I was there, the way we worked was he was in the middle and he had a student on either side of him. And this was out at Chillwood, I think. It was in New Hope. So, it was a very private setting. And one student would have been there for a year already when the new student came. That was just the way they did it. You sort of spent 2 years there. So the experienced student would help the inexperienced student. And so in this case, that's what this situation was. I was teaching privately, and I had Jeremy Pose, and I had a student on either side of me. And majority of the images in the show are from really from master classes, which we've given down here at the center, the Bartlett Center. But some of these are private, such as this one.
Okay. Thanks, Bill. So this to me is, it looks like it's about light. Am I right, Leona?
I mean, it was always, the challenge was always to capture the specific notes of color. And one of Nelson's many mantras was, you can get the right blue, but the wrong color. But if you get the right color, your value will be correct.
I remember Nelson saying something to the effect of, the right color in the wrong place is the wrong color.
I remember Nelson saying, painting is easy, put the right color in the right place.
Here's another great one. I like the contrast between the, you know, the background, the blue and the red.
And it was the same thing, you know, he would, for those who didn't know Nelson or did work, he could be like an army sergeant, just, you know, kind of walking past you and sort of, you know, really yelling like, you know, why is everything so hot? Where are the cools? So, you know, I was always so proud when I found a cool note. Heaven, it all went too warm.
I like this down here. These, again, just these little marks here. Dan, you want to say anything about this piece?
Yes, sure. This was done in 2012 during a 1-month workshop in the San Francisco area at a school called the Bay Area Classical Artists Atelier, run by Linda Delaney. And the model's name was Lurie. She was amazing. She posed for, I don't know how many sessions it was, but to me, it was a conversation about color modeling. That was the context. And so I think in the spirit of demonstration and pertinent to this conversation is the idea that you can unpack the whole kind of enterprise of painting into these little disciplines that can be isolated and then shown. And so color modeling in this demo, it was meant to be kind of beginning of color modeling around the periphery of the piece. So you'd look at, you know, big masses, big simple masses along the edges, and then you get a little closer to the middle. And let's say in the leg area, there'd be the beginning of a breakdown. We would say like major variations or major facets of the figure. And then as you get into the trunk and torso, things become much more minorly faceted, if that makes any sense. And so in that context, I was hoping to think of it as a timeline, to think of, you know, the one piece kind of like a record of a longer period of time, if that comes together. I know we talked about that in the Rising Voices show. So I think demos can be like that too.
So I'm going to confess that I have I sometimes daydream about being a student at Incaminati, and what would it be like to be a student at Studio Incaminati. And I know the whole first year is about drawing, right? And it's it's those quick sketches at the beginning, and it's all black and white pretty much in the first year. And then I start to get really scared about adding color. I think, what would I do? It seems to me like, I look at all the different colors on a palette and think, how would I come up with the right color? And then I look at this and I see just all those different colors. That step from black and white to color would be terrifying to me as a student.
If you get a beautiful model like that, it happens. So
okay.
You have to make it up.
This is also a really interesting one, and it's really, it's not the quality of the photograph, I don't think, because I've seen it in person, but there's a sort of ghost-like quality of this for me because of the lack of finish, right? There's no definition between fingers, the sort of the way the face is blurry. I like that a lot because I still get a sense of emotion from it, a sense of we're protecting ourselves with that blue blanket. This one is interesting, but it's for, it's similar to your previous one, Dan, but there's a sense of movement in this one. Like, he's about to stand, like Pedro's about to get up off the chair.
Yeah, Pedro is, just a kind of unforgettable enigmatic presence for modeling. It brings up the notion that you really have to give a lot of credit to the people that are posing in front of you for the audience, because if they emit, then there's such a better experience through that. And Pedro knew how to kind of deliver this silent dialogue in his pose. And he put together something here that I thought was really wonderful, because it was like he was getting up or he was getting back into pose. And that made all the more interesting. I have to say, looking at it a few years after it was done, it makes me think of the previous school that we used to have, that we used to share, called the Janus Collaborative School of Art. It was up in East Harlem, because that light was quite special. And that is exactly the light that I remember painting Pedro under. So it's funny how these experiences can be dated to a part of your life.
Mm-hmm. This is another I really like this one. I look at this one every day. And this one, I don't know, this one is, so this was hanging in the library of our old space. It's one of our faculty members, Robin Fry, who I think this really captures her spirit. It's really interesting how this one is so much more finished than the previous pieces by Nelson. But Bo, this is one of your more unfinished pieces?
Yeah, this was just a start. This again would have been done in private with just one student on either side, teaching privately, not in a masterclass setting. And it would have been the first day. Usually, most of the pieces that I have there were about 3 days. 3 days. Usually, if it's in a masterclass situation, it would be 3 days of 8 hours each. But this would have been probably 4 hours, just getting the drawing down. And that shows, I do a quick grisaille underneath the flesh, whereas Nelson would have just gone right in with the full color right on top of a gray panel or a tan panel. I build up a little, just so I can really establish my light mass a little. And it's just really to get the drawing down. Nelson always insisted on us really being able to handle the drawing before we move on into painting. And he would, when I was there, he would force the student to draw with open form charcoal drawing, wipe out charcoal drawing until they could really, get all the tonal relationships right and everything in the right place before they moved on to doing tonal sepia colored kind of underpainting with the 3 primary colors, which were then burnt sienna, probably cobalt blue, and raw sienna or yellow ochre, and white. So this is sort of a start of one, which I think I don't remember exactly what happened, but I think maybe the model didn't come back, or I would have normally finished this, but that's just a start.
This one, to me, though, the eyes look almost finished, right? They're so penetrating, I think.
Well, you try to get things in the right place,
Yeah.
But you keep it open, so there's not a hard line around anything. You keep it open so you can keep shifting things and moving things around.
Leona, do you want to say anything about this piece?
This piece is more I didn't go for the nuance of this one. This one is just sort of like a very simple, bold color relationships. Large shapes, but it's just so important. I can't express enough to students. Demonstrations are beneficial to students, but for the artist to complete a 3-hour sketch and capture all the necessary information in a 3-hour sketch, I think that, because basically a demonstration can be, as little as 3 hours,
Mm-hmm.
and to be able to capture the essence of everything in those 3 hours, that's power for the individual.
Wow.
And I just constantly was, I don't know, I just, it's challenging, it's really challenging. And I think I could spend 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, just constantly trying to capture it, capture it, capture it. And although I love long painting, I love, love, love the challenge of trying to capture everything in 3 hours. Well, by the time the model breaks, let's say 2.5 hours. So yeah, this one, it's just very simple.
I do, so is that, Leona, I just want to follow up on your comments. Is it like practice then for you when you're demoing? Is it like, you know?
Yeah, I find demoing, I find, for instance, Dan, Bo, and our faculty, you know, they're virtuosos. You know, they just go out, and Nelson certainly, you know, they just go out there and they can do it. For me, even though demoing is developing you are, I personally, painting or demoing, I find it personal growth. I think that there's nothing to compare pressure of having to produce you know, that complete image in, again, let's say 2.5 hours, or it could be longer. But so not only is it beneficial to the student, but I think it's the most remarkable growth opportunity for the artist as well. So I think it's a goal for a student to try to work towards, you know, over the course of the years of their training, to try they can really off a powerful painting in a short period. It's all about that because when he was a student, and you have to put it into context, he was born in 1937. So he went through the era, the period where representational figurative art was not highly regarded. And there were no ateliers. And there were, he first sought a teacher. He was with someone who came up to him and said, you know, you just don't have it. You don't seem to be able to draw. You don't know your color. You can't paint. And Nelson was so frustrated, and he handed him the brush and he said, show me. Well, the guy couldn't show him. And, you know, it just meant a lot to, Nelson was an advocate of every artist should know their art history. And he knew the sketches, the oil sketches that the painters from the Baroque period could produce. So they did their big grand finished paintings, but like Rubens or Titian, they could do powerful, like quick sketches, quick oil sketches. And I kind of relate the demonstrations to those oil sketches. And, you know, when you have it, when you're a virtuoso, you know, you've sort of reached the ultimate, you know, you've become a master. And I personally think, like, when you have time to paint a long painting, 3-4 weeks, you know, you can usually work your way through it, but to be able to pull it off in a short time, I just think it's the ultimate excitement.
That's great. Thanks. So this is an interesting piece, Dan, right? This is about planes and surfaces.
This drawing began as a conversation, again, in a group setting at the Art Students League of New York. And the context of the discussion was about being, quote, on the form. What does it mean to be on the form? On the form is a really weird, elusive term for people who are learning to draw because it implies a capacity to describe the topography of the outer surface of the body. So the drawing on the right was developed as an addendum to the drawing on the left, both during and after the drawing on the left, because it helped to clarify what tone could mean when tone turns into surface. So again, this goes back to my point about, you know, kind of separating the independent disciplines, the complementary disciplines of the great craft that we've all inherited, and then hyper-focusing on those disciplines gives a full series of talking points, because you, as a teacher, you encounter people who are inherently gifted at some of those disciplines and are utterly lacking in others. and you try to help them and at the same time bolster your own skills by launching into these different kinds of demonstrations, as long as you don't demo the same thing all the time.
Thanks, Dan. So this is an interesting piece. Go ahead, Leona.
This is Stuart Piebar. He actually is the founder of the New York Academy of Art. And so this painting was done at the New York Academy of Art, and Stuart, the founder, I believe it was founded in 1977. And yeah, so it's just, you know, relating the large masses.
Mm-hmm.
Nelson would always, you know, he often was a man of few words. In fact, many students would believe that he was kind of keeping the true secrets from them. Because ultimately, it was all simple. He broke it down into a very simplistic approach. And if you understand it in its simplest form, you ultimately to the most complex.
Mm-hmm.
So, in fact, you can see one of his last paintings behind me, the Belly Dancer. And if you compare the Belly Dancer behind me with this one of Stuart, you have to be able to relate those colors and masses of color, including the pattern of light and shadow, before you can paint the subtlety of the painting behind me. So that's what he was continually trying to show with the painting demonstrations. And I really appreciated that, like, he was very repetitive in his teaching. Sometimes I'm sure we've all heard people that, like, they're so complicated and so, like, you get lost in what they're trying to say. They're so intellectual. But Nelson, he was an intellectual, but he never, like, he spoke very simply when he was teaching, because he was just trying to get the same concept across over and over, mainly because it's hard. It's very difficult. But, you know, at Incaminati, from the first day of year 1 up to the last day of year 4, you're learning different things throughout the entire 4 years. You know, we give you time with the instructors to work your way through each discipline, but the skill and discipline is built on the previous skill and discipline that you learn. So in the end, you know, you have all this information that you get to compile into this 3-hour, you know, sketch or drawing or painting. But like Nelson's demonstrations were always all about, you learn all this information, you put it all in there, but, you know, you have to pull it off. So, I mean, I look at this and I almost think like, wow, it's so simple.
Mm-hmm.
And it is simple, but it's also many years of education.
Right. It does convey a lot. You know, the way he's looking sort of down, and, you know, so part of it is because he's hanging up high in our hallway. I feel like every time I walk down, he's looking down at me. It's an interesting feeling. But you bring up a point, Leona, that I another facet of the demo that I think is interesting, and is that, you know, when you're demoing, don't you have to talk and paint at the same time, right? And what kind of a challenge is that?
You know, when I studied with Nelson, he didn't talk at all.
No.
You know, I learned to paint in 2 years, and he basically never said a word.
Wow.
So it was show, don't tell. You know, he mixed the colors, and when we would take a break, we'd go over and look at his palette and see how he got there, and we'd go back and try to do it in hours. Well,
Bo, he barely spoke to me for 3 years and 8 months until he asked me out on a date. So we were with him at the same period of time.
Yep. Yeah.
Dan, what was your experience?
So as I had mentioned earlier, I went through 4 years of art school, didn't ever really see a demo, and got into the atelier system. And it was this one really crazy week in my experience where my teacher, who was Cedric Egley, was doing a demo the same week that I heard about a demonstration being done up in Paffa in Philadelphia. I'd never been to Philadelphia, but I had a close friend, great painter, great guy named Steve. And Steve's like, let's go to Philly. He was from Philly. So we went up to, must have been, it was 20 or so years after Bow. So it was around 1995 or something. And Nelson was doing the demonstration of Grace under the Grand Rotunda at the Pennsylvania Academy. And as soon as it started, Steve leans over to me and he goes, "This is total show." And it was like, and he was right. But what was really telling was the embodiment, was that kind of pageantry, was, this is what being an artist is about. It's difficult to put words on it, but there was a performative quality to it, but that was part of what made it so majestic and so awe-inspiring. It changed my life, and it was a demo.
Yeah.
I remember that demo. Yeah, I remember how much he started with these grand gestures, he would step back. And I was like, I leaned over and I said, he didn't start like that when I was painting.
You should have been an actor. All right, I'll move on. Here's one I like too. So I don't know, Leona, that really captures you, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, he did this one at the Art Students League. I'm trying to think. This was probably around maybe 1990. Again, it's you can see he didn't complicate it. But the more you know about painting, you can see the color shifts. You can see the temperature shifts in, let's say, the purple or the flesh. Once he got the large masses of color relationships, then he could move forward with more subtle warms and cool within each color.
Mm-hmm. All right. Oh.
Yeah, this was done in a master class. This is Alexis. And, when I studied with Nelson, he always painted under the big north window at Chilwood and New Hope. And so I learned to paint that way, unlike with the artificial lights. So I always insisted that when I would have a master class, that we would be somewhere where everyone could paint under the natural light. Even if, the weather got gray and dark, I still, I'd say, look harder, and he'd say, I can't see the color. And I'd say, look harder. But this is one that I'd started, and she was nude. She posed nude. And then I think after the class, I stuck that little wedding dress on her. Not sure exactly why, but I think, whenever I paint a portrait, and this, I don't think of these as paintings. I think of these as just, demonstrations and trying to show other people in the class. We had 20 people in the class, and we had 2 models, one on each end. And I had 10 people around me, and I would usually have a senior student on the other end painting the other model with 10 students around them. So we would have 20 students in the class. And during the breaks, they would come over and look at the painting and see how I got in there. The drawing's a little funky on this, but I always think about Nelson with the color when I'm mixing the color and how he got there. Mixing across the color wheel with the complements to get the beautiful rich neutrals. And he never talked to me about that. I just looked at his palette and figured out how he did it.
Well, he always taught with a 500-watt halogen light on the model because he felt it was easier for the students to see the color and the more chiaroscuro light and shadow pattern. So I agree with you. The cool daylight is far more difficult.
When I was there, if it was a gray day, he would call my house and say, "We're not painting today." So I would drive from Philadelphia to New Hope every day to take us to spend time with him, and he would just call me off like at before 8 in the morning and say, "It's too gray, not painting."
Leona?
Again, the same thing. This one is a fairly short painting, probably under 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
You can see on his face under the zygomatic arch that it's just the tone of the canvas. I didn't even put any middle value in. There's no dark light or terminator. Yeah, so it's again just getting the large relationships.
Mhm.
You don't go into the net, like this would be phase one of a block-in. You don't go into the, subcolors until you get the large relationships.
Okay.
And again, that's what I loved about his teaching. He just kept it so, I mean, he collected Baroque art. He was an art scholar. He was a connoisseur. He could hold conversation with Margaret Thatcher, while she posed. They could talk politics. He could talk with kings and queens. He certainly was a great communicator, but when he taught, I found that he always kept it simple. He just wanted to drive home to students, like, you just got to get the relationships, the start with the large relationships. Everything is relative, because
Mhm.
not only comparing one color to another, but you also have to key it, which students can really have a hard time grasping this. But for instance, if you think of like warm and cool temperatures, if you're outside and it's high noon on a hot summer day, blue sky, is that a warm or cool temperature? Well, his answer would be, well, everything is relative. And then the student might get really mad and say, like, you're not telling me the answer. But then if you push, he'll say, well, what is this light relative to a sunset? When that hot yellow orange light is low on the horizon, then suddenly it clicks. And you think, oh my gosh, this noontime sun, the sun high in the sky, is cool relative to a hot sunset. So, he always pushed the student to learn to figure it out.
Mhm.
What I recall is when I was there was once we had learned to draw with paint in the sort of monochromatic stage of a painting, then he would put us outside in the springtime and put us out and let us do the mud heads, which was a fully prismatic palette in the sunlight with a brick or something, some object, and we would have to see not the local color of the object, but the color of the light on the object. And that was the beginning of really beginning to understand the concept, the color of the light, not the color of the thing.
Yeah, and that's why I love the classes at Incominati. We have great teachers that I think that's year 2 where they teach they put the filters on the light, and I love that class.
Well, we're going outside now too, right, Dan, to do the mud heads?
Doing mud head painting Mondays, Monday mud heads, level 2, be there.
They call them mud heads for a reason, because you make a bloody mess.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was another one done in private, so this would have been with a private student or two. Yeah,
Mhm.
probably 2 private students, one on either side.
Uh-huh.
And just painting, not saying much, but just letting the students paint alongside me, and then when I would break, they would come figure it out.
So are they watching and imitating you?
No, they're painting, they're busy painting too, but then when we
Right.
take a break, and I'm not as regular on breaks as you have to be in school. We'd work for hours, before.
Until the model got a cramp or something.
That's why none of the poses are very difficult. The poses are just sitting there in a very comfortable pose so that they can hold it for as long as possible. And that way we can work for as long as possible.
Mhm.
And this was done on Vashon Island when I lived on Vashon. And we had something called the Vashon Academy, which was just 2 students besides Alexis, the model, who wound up becoming like a student as well. And just posing there on the sofa, and both a skylight and a window in that studio. That was actually the east window. The north window is in the background there. Painting all over. And this again wouldn't have been too many sessions, but probably a few days. Pretty much. Well, probably in that case, just a 4-hour sessions.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Is this the color? Oh, just the color of the light, the color of the couch reflecting off of onto her skin?
Yes, usually the reflected light and the shadows
Yeah.
is based on what's around it. Yes, so
Yeah.
that's informing that.
I'm learning about light.
So these duotone, this is second year class where the brown is what we call grisaille, which is a combination of burnt sienna and blue, and then a wash of flesh tone. There's a little bit of buildup in the arm. So this is pretty much second year. It's shapes of light and shadow, very simple. When you get into third year, Zhifang and Natalie take this class further into more developed duotone into color. But this is a very important, I always think of the training as, the charcoal drawing, then the grisaille, then the duotone, and then the color studies. So this duotone is a very important phase of the training.
Well, now this is certainly about light, I think, right? Dan, I mean, it's really, this is just, it sort of pops really, I mean, it's really a striking piece, Dan.
Oh, thank you, Jim. So this came out of the Art Students League. I don't remember the year exactly, but I used to run a class in Studio 15, had a great group, a lot of students, and inherently I would go into grisaille, but also into different colored gels on the models. So there was one time I was coming in for a demo, it was a 2-night demo, and the monitors, they both told me, we set up something that you can't paint. And so it was a challenge. And I come in and there's this kind of vampire-like setting, and there's John, up on the model stand, and off I went to try to make sense of what was going on. The funny thing related to this is later that year during the class party, because we always had a class party at the end of the year, everybody was always having a bit too much to drink. And so John, the model in this painting, shows up at the class party and has a little bit way too much to drink and makes a class announcement with his arm around me that he's so happy to spend time in the Dan Geno class. Wrong Dan. So I think of John. John was just so, so unique. And he had been a gymnast, I think, because he had this really interesting rib cage that kind of looked like it was built wrong, but so fascinating. Like you took it down to the wood shop and you cut it a different way. And it was always on full display when he was posing. So
this was a challenge by your students?
Yeah. To see, of course you get every red you have on hand and try to push it. But then you wind up realizing that you have to push the green because a red gel just automatically pushes the opposing areas that are not illuminated by that gel in the opposite direction.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting where where there's shadow and the cooler, I guess, purple that's there. Really interesting.
Yeah, thank you.
Dan, what colors did you, in the reds, did you also include, was it cadmium scarlet or yellow? What orange? Was it just everything?
I think it was kind of everything. My mainstays were cadmium scarlet, but also a cadmium yellow extra deep, cadmium orange. But then I like using the parylene. I like using the quinocridones. I like using the anthraquinones. I don't use a lot of traditional colors in these light key studies because the traditional colors don't have the punch when you need it most in a situation like this one.
Wow. And you said that was 2 nights?
Yep. In Studio 15.
What's the significance of Studio 15?
Well, when the league was originally built, there wasn't actually an art students league on the first floor. It shared the space with 2 other institutions. It was called the American Fine Arts Building, and so it was not called the Art Students League Building. And the entire first floor was a series of exhibition spaces. in the back of the first floor was what was called the Vanderbilt Gallery. And if you remember the lecture that Sam Knecht did about Cecilia Beau having the place of honor, it would have been in Studio 15, right on the edge between 15 and 16. That's where the place of honor was in the annual shows. Hers was in 1913, I think. But those have been converted into studios, and that's where that was done.
Okay.
Yeah, so this was a demonstration about tonality. It was done with ivory, black, and white. This was done as a workshop in Virginia last year. And really the concept was to try to take the intimidation factor out of tone by thinking of tone and tonality as a series of clearly identifiable mosaic patterns that assemble themselves in the spirit of the ébauche and then gradually become surface oriented. And so that's what that was about.
Is that what's behind you, Dan? Is the model what's behind you there? Yeah.
Right there, yeah. Hard to stop painting that guy. He actually is an écorché created by Paul Richet, the famous anatomist. And you know, there are just characteristics there that I think are on another level from Houdon. It's so interesting to try to work on. But I think that the concept of value is very, like it really confuses students a lot. But when you take it on and try to identify it and discuss it in a constructive way, it's not too terribly difficult. It's possible to, you know, it doesn't have that appeal that color does, where, you know, it can throw you off so completely.
So
I think value is more accessible.
there's a question that, you know, I can't see the chat bar because I don't want to mess with what everybody's seeing, but question from Alex about whether they think of color versus value, or value as an aspect of color.
I separate them out, and it just has to do with the way I learned to draw first, and then the way I learned to figure out how to do color second. So I make sure I get my drawing down and the tonal relationships down, and then I start to think about the color, because color is so relative. You know, it's like it'll read if the form is there. So you know, it's like the structure, getting the structure down. But that's me, you know. I mean, I think everybody approaches it different.
Leona or Dan, you want to add to that?
I mean,
Yeah.
I think you study value and you study color, and eventually, you know, that's becoming a master. They come together. You know, it just becomes intuitive for you. I live for that day.
When I was a student, I was taught in color situations that I was like, the worst insult, the worst thing I could ever become was, quote, a tonalist. And then when I was in tonal drawing and value painting situations, I was not to be ruined by the color painters. So my answer is, as long as those two things can coexist beautifully, and you don't have any kind of weird affiliations like that with them, they're going to work for you.
Thanks.
It's a great question.
Great question.
So Dan did this online for Studio Caminati in a 2-day masterclass online. And I remember getting text from Dan at the end of the day. He spent 10 hours, I think, with students online doing these.
They're great people. It was a pleasure to do so. I can tell you that the demo was done from a combination of bone structure and a cast and my own hand. And so really the demonstration is a blend of those. You know, the drawing up on the upper left is the kind of, what's the word? It's like the anchor drawing. And it doesn't look very much like the cast. It is like the confluence of bone structure information and life drawing kind of imposed on the cast. And that's what was interesting about the drawing and about the experience, was being very interpretive about what was going on. So every value meant something as it pertained to a certain kind of bone, be it the scaphoid or, you know, the perspective on the back of the hand, or those form and cast shadows and how things were built. You know, lots of discussions about cross section. So that's why those little shapes are at the bottom. I was borrowing those little cross sectional shapes from Stephen Rogers' pec so that I can impose them on the finger cross sections, both proximally and distally. And I think we had a good time.
So Samantha with a pink ribbon. There are a couple that I think, Leona, there are a couple of Nelson's pieces that look sort of similar. Like, do you know the ones I'm talking about? This one, I think there are two others that look sort of similar in what they're doing and the colors they're using.
You know, I think he was always trying to show students, you know, I mean, take skin color, for example.
Right.
And so not only, you know, is everybody's skin color unique, but then the light that you have on the model, and just, you know, constantly trying to show them the same thing over and over. It's amazing how students can complicate things. He would always say that he would have to unlearn students. He would have to get them to erase things that they had, like. So, you know, she had extremely fair skin, and, you know, just wanted to, you know, the greatest compliment you could have given Nelson was to tell him that he taught you to see, you know,
Right.
eyes and.
When I studied with Nelson, after I had gotten out and I graduated also from the Pennsylvania Academy, I started doing portraits for a few years in Philadelphia. I remember one of the first portrait clients, it was a doctor, I think, and he was posing for me, and he watched me paint. And, you know, I would mix a color and try to get the right color and put it on, and it would either work or not work, and I'd mix another one. And he'd say, "This is the way you do it?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he said, "You don't have a system?" It's like, "No, I don't have a system." I was like, you know, the light is going to be different every day, and you know, you ate something different for breakfast. You know, it's going to change, and I have to paint what I'm seeing. And it was very upsetting to him that there wasn't all the colors weren't mixed up, and I didn't just put them on already.
Yeah, there was one artist. He was a contemporary of Nelson's, and he had flesh by numbers. Flesh number 1, flesh number 2.
Oh dear. Well, let's see. Oh,
Yeah, so this is, you know, this would have been one done in a master class. So, you know, she was up on the model stand, and would have had 10 students around me, and, you know, and is just sitting there for 3 days, looking and painting and showing them how to, you know, match the colors that we're seeing. And so, you know, it was a very straightforward demo.
This is a nice one as well. This one is right across from you, Leona, in the corridor.
Yeah, this one, you know, it's much more subtle. This was in natural light. It's much more subtle. This is actually, do you remember which year this was painted? 2014. This was 2014. So this was a year before he passed. And because of his cancer, he was not able to detect the color yellow. So in 2014, he was overusing yellow, and you can see these spots in here. It shows up more in the picture than it does in the painting, actually, but you can see that there are, well, I mean, it's funny because we did pick it up, but you can see spots of yellow. You wouldn't notice it in the real painting, actually. It's funny for me that the camera did pick it up, because there are certain paintings that he did where, for instance, in his last year in 2015, he passed in August, but he did, he must have done at least 6 portrait commissions that were phenomenal. A couple of them double portrait commissions, but this one in particular, this woman had, well, her hair had turned white. She was about 70, but he put this massive, just loaded brush of yellow, which is kind of out of place, but yeah, his eye couldn't pick up yellow anymore, so he was overusing yellow. He was very sick. Yeah, he was pretty sick, but it didn't stop him from painting. But you know, the way he broke up that sleeve into shapes.
Mhm.
You know, it was just, to watch him paint, he was rhythmic. You know, he would look, mix, lay the patch of color, look, mix, lay the patch of color all day long, 8-10 hours a day, just very rhythmic.
Yeah.
It's like breathing, and that's what I would say to my students. It's like, you look and paint, you look and paint, and it's about just, it's like looking is like breathing, and then you exhale. It's just that rhythmic, taking the information in, get the information in, and get the information down. Get it in, get it down. So you're not looking for too long, and you're not painting for too long. It's a constant process of look and paint, look and paint.
Agreed. There was a time when I asked Nelson which of any of his paintings he'd ever done would he have students copy, and he said, my demos. And I thought a lot about that after he said it, and I think that in many circumstances his demos were reactionary. They were done in a certain way to address a specific concern, and I just think only the best of them can do that, because oftentimes there's not enough control over a demo to be able to gear it toward a specific thing within all of that subtlety and that nuance of technique, but he could do it. So found that interesting.
Dan, I know you like this model.
This was Allison. Yeah, she's just a no nonsense, great model, dancer.
Well, there's a great deal of motion, I think, in this piece, even though she's standing still.
Well, she brought it. So again, it goes to just how important our models are. Now they know how to emit and how to kind of emanate a certain kind of presence and they have to do it in front of a crowd, which makes it odd as well, because oftentimes when you have a model, it's between you and the model, your concept, the model, and trying to go through this specific kind of narrative. But in the group setting, it's quite unique. So,
and even her hair is moving.
Right? She had moving hair. What can I say?
Okay. Do you want to say anything about this?
Just the same thing, always the same thing, really. It's in all the years I knew Nelson, and I'm sorry to repeat myself, but like, that's one of the things I loved, one of the many, many, many things I loved about him.
Mm-hmm.
It was just always the same. He felt that it was really important to master technique. It was all about Beethoven and Bach. You better be able to do those piano scales. Your value scales and color scales are the same as your piano scales. And you better be able to do it blindfolded.
Mm-hmm.
So he was so intelligent and so intellectual, but he always brought the training down to the same, almost repetitious, because again, the better you are at the fundamental base foundation,
Mm-hmm.
that gives you the freedom to advance. So, if you can get this part down, quickly, rapidly, then you take it from there. His whole point was, learn the fundamental skills to give yourself the freedom to fly.
All right.
And I really appreciated that, because again, you've been, like, for instance, he loved art history. He was a scholar, and he and a connoisseur, and he could talk endlessly about just hundreds of great masters from the past. The thing that he felt that we should all be extremely educated on those who have come before us. Thus the name Incaminati, from the art school founded by the Carracci in 1582. because, I think also in the time that he was born into, and he would listen to the sort of like the conversation about contemporary art. He just thought it could get so aloof and so almost arrogant.
Mhm.
And he just felt it was really important for artists to stay true to their roots and just remain humble. And it was always all about nature.
Right.
People to learn and capture the essence of nature and what it has to offer. Nature is your inspiration.
I wonder, I'm looking at the clock and it's almost 7:15. I wonder if we should stop with the demos here and open it up to questions. Are you all okay with that?
Fine, sure.
So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we'll look at the chat bar. There you all are. So let me see. Will you guys be doing a Q&A? Yes, that's now. As Howard Pyle said, value does the work, color gets the credit. What do you think of that?
I'd never heard that quote. I love that quote.
All right.
What was it? Value gets the what?
Value does,
Value does the work,
color
color
gets
gets the
credit.
credit.
Yeah.
I like that.
Well, he was big on values.
So knowing that there is limited time during a demo, how different is your process during the demo versus your private studio work?
I'll go. I don't teach that much. I've pretty much stopped teaching. I used to teach a lot, and I thought the best way to teach was to paint, in front of them, because you can really learn how to see that way. But basically, for me, I don't like anybody around when I'm working on a painting. It's sort of like teaching a demo is like teaching somebody how to drive. And so, you're just teaching the basics of how to drive. You're not telling them where to go or what they're going to do with it. And so, but once you get to your painting, that's when you're taking your trip, and that's when you're going somewhere. So that's the next step. So for me, I don't like anybody. I don't like any distractions. It's really distracting to paint in front of people, and it takes extreme concentration and focus. It's like being a golfer or something. Not to use a sports analogy, but I did. It's because you have to stay focused. Totally focused with the gallery around you and everybody watching you and people on TV and millions of people watching. But when you're painting, you've got 20 people watching or something, or in Nelson's case, hundreds, and you have to stay focused. And it takes extreme amount, incredible ability to stay that focused. When you're painting on your own, you don't have to be as focused. You can put something down and either look back, it either works or doesn't work. And but you're trying to get something else in a painting. You have to hold all the things have to hold together. It's a very different process than just doing an observed demo of what's right in front of you.
Mhm.
That's my 2 cents.
Leona, how does your demoing differ from your private studio practice?
In your private studio, you get to spend more time. I think the demo ability absolutely 100% supports your painting. I think it makes you a faster painter eventually. In fact, Nelson I think he was a very fast painter. He painted, I averaged about 50 canvases a year. I met a painter last week. He told me he does 1 painting a year. Nelson was very fluid with his painting. So I think that the demoing strengthens you as a painter.
Mhm.
What about you, Dan? You do a lot of demoing.
I do, Leona, thank you. I do a lot of teaching. I was looking through this, by the way, this is a really great book. Anybody who wants to pick it up, it's called The Academy in French Painting in the 19th Century. It's a really interesting book about the construction of the atelier system in Paris and the emergence of this idea of the sketch, which essentially kind of undid the Academy's, sense of what it was. And he talks about the sketch, its evaluative qualities being spontaneity, sincerity, and originality. And I think he could just as easily have been talking about demonstrating, because in demoing, you can't fake it. You're in front of a crowd and they can detect insincerity a mile away. I'm thinking about in terms of spontaneity, you come up with something like in that Stuart Piebar painting. Stuart Piebar, for anybody who knows anything about Piebar, he's a very controversial figure. Nelson made him look like he came out of the 18th century as a sort of Lord Duke incarnate or something like that. So that's incredible spontaneity. But I would say, to try to get down to the essence of the answer, by having that experience in front of a crowd and constantly being focused on trying to get to the point of the matter, it makes the work in the studio when there's nobody around so much more about painting and drawing with purpose. There's no fluff to it because you do it so much in front of an audience. You got to get it done. You got to get it right. You can't mess around with it. That I think that adds a lot of momentum to those moments. And sometimes if I'm adrift in, we all go adrift sometimes, but if I'm in the space alone, sometimes I'll imagine I'm in a demo situation, because that'll help me get back into the swing of just get it done the way you want it, and don't lose focus.
Well, so since your demo is basically alla prima, somebody asks how you deal with the once only process. You have that 3 hours or whatever it is of the demo, and then it's done.
If I understand the question, like a demo is basically an abbreviation of a long painting.
Right.
So like you still have to get all the same information into it, but yeah, it's different. It's a loaded brush. It's quick, it's abbreviated, but in a way, it's still the same information. The transition of form, the value shifts from light into shadow.
That's a great point.
Yeah, a painting is good or bad. I mean, right as you start. I mean, it's going to be good. It's good where the first few marks are not. And whether you spend a month on it or 2 months on it or 3 hours on it, you're either seeing the whole and getting everything down, or you're not. And a great painting, can stop anywhere along that way, anywhere along the way.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there was a great work ethic that Nelson put into us, because it was that, it was something. And I have some sketches that he started, oil paintings that he started just after a couple of days, just quit right after a couple of days. And they're like fully formed paintings, but to him, he was going to spend another 2 months on them or something, or 6 weeks, but he just stopped for some reason.
So someone asks, when working with value, do you demonstrate by starting with the darkest darks, then working to the middle values, or do you work from the middle values out? How do you approach color?
Who's the question for? Everyone?
Any one of the three of you. I know it's not for me.
I like when I'm drawing, I like to look for the darkest darks first. I like to just see where they are. It doesn't mean I'm going to put them down as dark as they are right away, but it's a good starting point, because your eye's going to go to the lightest and darkest thing right away. So, it's good to at least note where those darkest darks are. But you're really just breaking things up into, light mass, shadow mass. And then I like to back for the darkest darks, just like you do, with the lightest lights, hold back to the closer to the end to actually like build the form. And there was a question about color in there. I'm not sure how to answer that.
Just how you approach color.
Um,
Let me ask this. Let me ask it. So, I'm going to start with Dan on this because you've done so much of the you've done demoing online. Is it easier to do it online, or would you prefer to have a live audience?
It's easier in some ways to do it online because when you're demonstrating for an audience, they tend to be right up where you are. You essentially can place their eyes at a very close proximity to the work. And so certain things actually function more effectively as learning tools in demonstrations with regard to self-portraits, hands, feet, close-up, oriented things can work very well. The issues with the light can make it tricky. The issues with the delay in communication can make it challenging. So when you're in the room with people, again, I mentioned this before, when I first encountered demonstrations for people like Nelson, it was like magic. And there's something about the full experience of the whole affair that makes it unforgettable. I mean, every one of those pieces you showed tonight were done with an audience in a conversation with a particular set of talking points, a peculiar set of talking points. And that made each of those experiences unique. And there's a very truncated lifespan to those demos. But I think the more often than not depends on the demo, but I'd like to have the audience there in person.
I think it's like I was saying at the beginning about it being performative. We lose that. We have the artifact at the end. What we're missing is that performance. And there is, I think, when you do it live, I imagine there's a kind of electricity, like you find when you go to the theater, right? There's a sort of electricity in the air for a live performance versus a movie.
One of the things that reminds me of is that there's a quote. I can't remember who said it now, but it is a quote that says, "You can't look good and get good at the same time." And I think one of the pressures of giving a demo is that you basically want to look good, you want to get good, you want it to be something that inspires the students. So that's one of the challenges.
So,
when you're in your studio alone, it don't matter if it's not good at the time, because you know what it's going to get in the end. You'll get there.
There's also an intense psychology associated with that, because I mean, I was telling Jim I don't know how long ago we had this conversation, but I was at one of the big art fair conferences and there was somebody on the main stage doing a demo and it was obviously going very badly. I mean, sweating bullets, you could see from the body language, it was a train wreck. And so I went up to this person on break and I said, "You're killing it. You're doing a great job. Keep going, because it's really possible to get into like a negative cycle mindset and the whole thing just falls apart. And that makes it all the more interesting from a performative.
That happens to actors all the time. His performance doesn't go well and you're in the middle of it.
And it may be going great, but you could derail your own demo because
Right.
you overcook it. Your self-critical nature kind of destroys it.
Well, and I think you try to wrap it up a little bit. That's one of the things, and that's what Robert Henry said. He said that, so often students will work for days on a painting, say 8 days on a painting, and in the last 30 minutes, they'll ruin it because they're trying to bring it all together and finish it, as opposed to just continuing to do what they've done all the way through and run through the finish line by just continuing to gather the information till time is up. And so I think, that idea of trying to finish it, we get it in our heads at that point.
Dan and I talked earlier this year with the level chairs about finishing. And I asked this because I get to ask naive questions. How do you know when it's finished? It's not like, you're writing a screenplay and 150 pages is a 2-hour film, whatever. How do you know when you're finished with a painting?
For me, I'm finished when I can't think of anything else to do.
Leona?
People always ask that question. You just
sorry.
know.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I never analyzed it, but
Yeah.
you just know. Ooh, I better think of an answer for future.
Well, for me, it was when I had filled in all the numbers correctly and I was done. Dan, how do you know when you're finished with the painting?
So, I mean, my answer ties back into the idea of the demonstration. I was looking at the Christian Bookheit book, and the word that they used to use for chase was brushstroke chase. They call them brushstroke chase. And so there's this thing about calligraphy and the way you put the mark down. And so my answer about finish is you have to be very hyper aware of your own calligraphy, and when it starts to look overly labored, and when it starts to feel like you're pushing too hard on something, or you're becoming more reluctant than enthusiastic. And it's just kind of my totally inadequate way of trying to put words to a feeling that the artist gets that it's time to be done with it.
I think it's important to never be bored. Betsy Wyeth, Andrew Wyeth's wife, always told me, she said, you can tell in 1 second when an artist is bored by looking at the painting. So, just don't let yourself get bored. If you're bored and just trying to finish it, then, it's probably going to come through as something that you're bored with.
Maybe you step away for a day and come back. No, yes.
Titian used to turn him to the wall and wouldn't look at him for a long time. That's what they say. And he would turn it back and look at it with fresh eyes in a month or so and know what to do, know what else to do.
So how much of the demoing is about imitation or mimicking? Is that what it's about? Yes or no?
I don't. Anybody else? I don't. Not for me. I don't think imitation of what.
Well, what the master is doing, how they hold the brush, how they do.
Oh, I see. I see the question. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a lot of it. It is a mimetic thing. You do see how they did it, and you copy that and learn to. But I mean, hopefully, the person you're studying with is someone who you would like to paint like.
Right.
You want to. They see the world the way you see the world, and you want to learn how they did it. So that was the case for me. I mean, I like the way Nelson saw the world, and I wanted to figure out how he did that. So, but then that you learn that, and then you go your own way with it. It's not forever.
You develop your own voice.
Yes.
You have to. So you don't want to be emulating somebody else. No, and he would always say that. He said, like, even starting a school was tricky because he didn't want people to paint like him. That would be the worst thing. You want to give people the tools to be their own person and have their own style.
I'm sorry. No, that said, I think that when we were studying with Nelson, this was back in the 70s, everyone that you sort of left there when you felt like you could paint like Nelson, that was when you were done. And he knew it too. And he was like, you're done.
I love your story, Bo, about when you said you were out of there.
Yeah, that's what I say. It's one of the only things that I ever remember Nelson saying to me was when I walked in one day and he said, Bo, today is your last day. It's like my only quote from Nelson, just about.
That's great. Well, we're at 7:31. So any last comments or questions? It's really great spending time with you talking about this. One of the great pleasures I have in my job is sitting in my office with Dan talking about things like this. And I ask questions like, why do you do it like this? And why do you do that? And by the way, I hate charcoal. It's such a messy thing.
Yeah, for the record, you said that, not me.
Yes, that was me. I was in one of the charcoal drawing studios, and there was charcoal everywhere. How do the students work in this? They love it. They come out, with masks now. They come out, they got charcoal all over their mask, and I think, well, they should probably wear masks all the time.
Right.
So that's a great. I mean, I have the best job because I get to walk around and look at the students and ask questions and look at the work as they develop. And, when you do this long enough, you get to follow a group of students develop, right? And that's what's great about teaching or working in education is watching that development.
Totally. Right? Yeah. I would say my parting thought is that, just to reiterate, how powerful and unique a tool the demo is, because it's a kind of translation tool in addition to being an artifact of learning. It translates something as odd as curriculum written out. You as a student, you come into a school, you see curriculum written out, and you wonder, what in God's name does that look like? And the demo manifests it into a different form of universal language and shifts the dialogue and inspires you to reach. And I would further say that the demo is the tool of the good teacher to become a great teacher, and of the great teacher to become a master teacher, because once you get out of school, you want to continue to develop yourself. And the tool is almost more for the demonstrator in some respect than it is for the recipient and the audience, because it's just that specialized, and it should get more attention than it actually does at this point.
Yes, language.
Many of our teachers have great stories about, when we were so many years old, and Nelson said to, I remember Aaron and Steve and various people, Lee White, okay, get up and demo in front of, 65 people. And they tell stories of, kind of sweating bullets, but you do it. And then suddenly, like, you just feel, you feel, I think, you'd have to ask them, but, it's the right step. You can only take private, your private work so far, but then when you're forced to do it publicly, it puts a different type of pressure on you.
Mm-hmm.
And, Nelson felt it was a very important thing. So what were you saying, Bo?
Yeah, I was just saying, responding to Dan, that, painting is the universal language, and language itself is limiting, but the visual language, when you're actually showing by doing it, then it doesn't matter what language the viewer is speaking, they get it. So there's not that, you don't have to translate into words what you're showing. You can just do it.
I think I've been coming to understand that painting and dance are very similar in that regard.
It's a language. It's a communication.
Hey, what Bo just said inspired me to recall an experience I had when I was given a master class in China. I went to Shanghai, and they hired a translator for me. And it was a 3-day workshop, and the translator was there for 3 minutes. And then he left. Nobody could speak English, and I couldn't. All I could say was shishi and ni hao, And so it's just like what Bo said. You wind up creating these little visual communication tools, and you'd see people speaking Mandarin for a while, and then suddenly they'd start emphatically nodding their heads. It's like, oh, it makes sense, And so he's exactly right. There's something so awesome about how transcendent that visual language can be from culture to culture.
Well, thank all of you, the three of you, for your incredible insight into the demonstration and into the art of painting. I really appreciate it. And the art of teaching. I think you're all three wonderful teachers. So thank you. I want to thank again Steve Bennett and Bennett-Schmidt for funding the Higher Aim of Art lecture. And I want to thank our faculty and students who've joined us, and for our visitors. Hello and welcome to Studio Incaminati, and come see us in the Bach building.